Welcome back, everyone. In this lesson, I'll show you how to add and use the core elements of maps to your map documents, including north arrows, scale bars, and legends. We'll also use new navigation tools to get around in layout view. Let's start there. For this lesson, we'll be using a modified version of the map from last lesson with a few more map elements and labels on it. To start with, one thing I always do on accident in layout view is use the scroll wheel to try to navigate the map as I do in data view. And when I do, I see that it changes the view of the page, but the map view stays consistent. This is because when we're in layout view, we have a different set of tools for navigating the page. And if I want to navigate the data frame, I need to use the data view navigation tools instead. In fact, if I change the map extent in the data frame here and then switch back to data view, I'll see that data view tracks changes I made in layout view and vice versa. If I change my extent again in data view and go back to layout view, then the data frame on the page will reflect the change, but with differences since the current data frame size on the page is a different height and width than my data frame when I'm in data view. I should mention that everything I'm saying might be a little confusing here. Just know that as you use the software, you'll gain an intuitive sense for how to use all of these components. One spot that newer users of ArcGIS often get into trouble is that they'll work hard to lay out their map document and set the extent of their map just right, and then they'll switch back to data view to make a few adjustments to their cartography or their data. And while they're at it, they'll zoom around their map a bit. And when they come back to layout view, the extent is off a bit since the data view and layout view extents are connected. Then they need to adjust their data frame extent again, which can be tedious. The way to avoid this problem is to make effective use of bookmarks. Whenever you set the extent of a data frame with the intent of exporting a map with it, I highly recommend making a bookmark by going to the Bookmarks menu and clicking Create Bookmark, then giving it a name and clicking OK. Up in the top toolbars, we have a few other tools for working with our map page layout. The common theme here is that these help us change our view extent relative to the page rather than relative to the data. We can zoom in and out of the page with these tools, pan around the page, zoom the page to as big as it can fit in the window, or zoom to 100%. Similar to data view, we can also do a fixed zoom in or out and navigate to our previous and next views of the page. As a reminder, these same tools for navigating the data frame instead are right over here, and I can use them from within layout view to navigate my data. Okay, now that we know how to get around in layout view, let's spruce up this map document a bit to make it more complete and ready to share. The first thing I want to do in the case of this map is switch it to a landscape view. I think this data lends itself to that format. To do this, we'll go to the File menu, then Page and Print Setup, and I'll switch the orientation in the paper section to landscape. Note that the map page size, which is what we're actually trying to change now, switched to landscape too, since we have the Use Printer Paper Settings box checked. In most cases, you'll want to keep this that way. You're designing layout views for a specific target paper size, and it helps to keep them linked. I'll click OK now, and my page will switch to landscape view. While my page switched to landscape, it looks like my data frame didn't. I'll need to change that myself. I'll use the Select Elements tool, the black arrow up here, and then I can click on the data frame and resize it to my liking. I like to not have much of a margin on my page, so I'll drag it to the edges but leave some space over on the right to put my remaining map elements. Now that I have that space, I'll drag my title over there. Unfortunately, the title doesn't seem to fit here, and I can't just resize this type of box while keeping the font the same size. I'm going to need to make a new box that can better fit it at the same size. Since I want to keep my title linked to my document properties, I'm going to open the text for that and copy this special tag to the clipboard for the new title box. Then I'll delete my title and we'll add it back in a moment. For this next step, we'll need the Draw toolbar. I'll add that by right-clicking in a blank space up in the top toolbar and select the Draw toolbar from the massive list of selections. Then, in the text menu, I'll select the Rectangle Text option. This tool lets me create a text box where it will reflow the text so it stays inside when I resize it. Now, I'll create a rectangle up top over here. Then, I'll double-click on it to open it up and paste that special title tag in the text box. Since it's a new text box, I'll also need to change the size to be more appropriate for a title again. Finally, the rectangle will have a border on it by default. I'm going to remove it now by setting the border to none. Now, see that if I resize the title box, it reflows the text for me as expected. Next, I'm going to change my extent and zoom to where I want my map to show, rivers near Davis. So let's center Davis on the map so we can better see what's around it. Once I'm all set, I'll make a bookmark to remember that location. Next, let's do the more complicated item, the legend. For those of you not familiar with it by name, a legend helps people interpret a map by defining the symbols in use on the map. We can add a legend to our map by going to the Insert menu and selecting Legend. The most basic customization point for legends is to choose which layers are included in it. We can select a layer in the list on the Map Layers side and click the arrow to move it over to the right side so it's included in the legend. Or do the same on the right side to remove it from the legend. I'm going to remove the base map from the legend now. Other than selecting the layers to include, I'm going to keep the default options the legend wizard is offering me so that you can see how a basic legend appears. I'll click next all the way through this until it's finished. Now that the legend is created, let's move it over to the right side. This legend is big, but has a few different things going on. First, for our water bodies layer, it breaks out what each symbol means, including a few we don't see on the map. It tells us the field it uses to determine feature symbols below the layer name here. You can remove that from the legend, but we won't do that in this demo. For the rivers layer, where we symbolize them by how much area they have upstream, it's showing us each size of symbol in use. And lastly, it shows us our communities named census places in yellow at the bottom. Now, while I know what NHD water body and census places are, the target audience of this map might not. Now that I want to share my map, I want those to display as more public-friendly names on my map, such as water bodies and communities. To do that, I simply need to rename the layers. I'll do that now by clicking each layer and tapping the F2 key on my keyboard to rename them. You can also right-click. Once I do, the legend updates with the new layer name. One other common need is that there are a few types of water bodies shown in the legend that aren't actually displayed on the map. Let's remove those from the legend now since they're not useful to the viewer. I'll double click on the legend to bring up the properties pane. If I select the water bodies layer on the left, I get the options for it on the right. If I click the only show classes that are visible in the current map extent checkbox, then it will only include the items that are currently visible in the data frame. If you move the data frame extent, it will update the legend to match. Next, we'll add a couple more critical features of a complete map, the scale bar and the north arrow. These are both relatively simple things that have options for you to perfect your design. To add them, we'll once again go to the Insert menu, and this time I'll select North Arrow. A dialog will come up for me to select the style for the north arrow. Functionally, they're the same, and choosing one is about finding the one that best matches your map's style. I'll pick one here and click OK. Once it's added to my map, I can resize it, and if I wanted to, I can set basic options on it by double-clicking. Now we'll add the scale bar. We'll go back up to the Insert menu, but this time I'll select Scale Bar. I'll pick one from the box again, and it will be added to my map. Once it's added, I'll move it to the bottom here so we could see it. If you're not familiar with the scale bar, it helps viewers of your map to understand the on-the-ground distances by showing distances on your paper map and how those correspond to the on-the-ground distances. Now, I can resize the scale bar. By default, when I resize it, it will change the distance it shows. I want to do some basic customization of this scale bar. At this size, it's hard to see distances, so I'm going to change the number of divisions it has in it so that it's easier to see. I'll double click it to open up the properties, and then I can change how many times the bar is subdivided to show distances. Now, the last thing to do that should be on any map is to put your data sources and your own name and data somewhere. It's also a good measure to add the map projection, which can help people identify potential uses for the map, since projections have different trade-offs. To do this, I'll create another rectangular text box. Once again, I'll double click to open it up, then add my information. I'll use the shortcode DINETYPE = date to make sure that whenever I export the map, the date is updated. If I wanted to find more shortcodes like this, I can go to the Insert menu again and select Dynamic Text and use one of the options there. When I'm done, I'll change the text size so it fits better in the box, then click OK. And now we have a relatively complete map and can export it as we did in the last lecture. There are many other things we could do for a map document, but this gives us a basic complete map. So that's it for this lecture. We covered navigation in layout view and adding legends, scale bars, north arrows, and text to our map layouts. One thing to remember is that if you want to change the properties or options of something in layout view, that's accessed by double clicking on it. See you in the next activity.